Hi, Mark. It's so nice to meet you, and thank you
Nice
for
to
wanting
meet you
to
too,
chat.
Mariana. This is
Yeah,
great. Thank you for inviting me.
of course, yes. So we're going to talk about planetary cycles and how important they are and how to work with them or how to see them, or maybe how you have experienced them through your work or through your
Mhm.
personal life. Um, and we'll talk about how that is the theme of my book, of course.
Yeah,
But why don't we start by you talking a little bit about yourself and your practice? And I
about me.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, I'm Marc Laurenson, and I'm an Australian astrologer, and but I teach internationally. I run my own school. Sydney Astrology School is my school. I've been running that school for 18 years now, and it started off very small in Sydney, Australia, and now it's really, really big. I'm trying to keep up with it actually, and I'm teaching people from all over the world now. It's become quite successful for me, and I'm really, really happy that I could be making a living out of something that I love doing so much, because astrology is my life, and teaching astrology, and I do readings as well. I'm booked out for readings all year, everybody. So if you want a reading with me, it won't be until next year. But yeah, I've been an astrologer since I was a kid. I got my first astrology book when I was 10 years old. And I've mentioned this a lot in other interviews that when I was looking through the astrology stuff in bookshops, I felt like I knew this stuff already. Didn't feel like I had to learn it. I felt very familiar to me, and all the archetypes, the crab and the archer and the scorpion and the ram. They felt like friends to me. They felt like you know. Energies that I already knew. So learning astrology for me and coming into astrology for me was something more like a remembering rather than a learning. So, I became a professional astrologer at my first Saturn return, if we're going to be talking about cycles.
Mhm.
My first Saturn return, I became a professional astrologer by doing readings, but I didn't actually start my business and the school until the midlife cycles. So Pluto Square Pluto, Uranus opposite Uranus, and Neptune Square Neptune. So the big ones right in the middle of life, late 30s, early 40s. That's when I really got a big kick in the bum. And they were telling me those particular cycles were telling me you've got to pull your finger out and do something about your life. And so that's when I started my business, and that's when I started my school. So, if we're talking about cycles, life cycles for me were huge, really, really big, with my astrological journey. And we can really get stuck into cycles in that way because I honestly believe cycles are going to do that for people. They're going to be big shakers, movers and shakers for people when a planet comes into a strong position in a cycle. Yeah.
For sure. And you that's really interesting of you to share that it was the infamous Saturn return that so many people are afraid of, right? But that at the end of the day, Saturn is the planet that helps us build things in our lives.
Hmm.
And it is the planet of structure and accountability, self-accountability at the end of the
Hmm.
day. But then the midlife crisis cycles, that the Uranus opposition, the Neptune square and the Pluto square and all of that, um, that they together, right? They feel like this awakening, and that
Hmm.
that was when you actually, since it sounds like you were an astrologer in your past lives already, and I have a similar experience as well because I've seen that through my
Yeah.
Akashic records. Um, we have a tendency to think that the midlife crisis aspects are just really intense. They're just something to be afraid of, but you are talking about how that actually, those transits empowered you instead of.
Totally. Totally. I've done many talks on the midlife transits. I just did one a few days ago for Astrology Niagara, and I called it the Bridge to Awakening, and you actually use that word. And for me, it was a huge time. But it is a bridge. You know what I mean? Are you going to cross it or not? Because a lot of people get to midlife, cross the bridge, and start to change their life because really the midlife transits are midlife. They cut life down into the first half and the second half. And there's a lot of people who cross the bridge into the second half of their life and create a different act two. But there's a lot of people who don't, you know what I mean? They kind of rehash a lot of Act One stuff. And this makes Act Two more difficult for you because the midlife transits, each one of them, we're talking about the outer planets, we're talking about the transpersonals, we're talking about Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune, all making hard aspects with themselves. And Pluto is always going to be about power, your sense of power, personal power, and where you give that away and what you're frightened of. So you're going to be faced with a lot of stuff, around this thought of, I'm halfway through my life. What am I doing? Where am I giving my power away? What am I still frightened of? And so that'll make you sit up and take notice because you're thinking, life's ticking away and I'm still allowing money or other people or, my insecurities or whatever to frighten me and to scare me when I've got so much to do, when I know inside of myself what a powerful being I am, but I'm making myself small. I'm making myself insignificant and scared. So Pluto will really face you with something on that level. Neptune is always going to be, yeah, Neptune Square Neptune is always going to be a feeling of having to release something or let go of something or detach from something because Neptune tends to melt. It tends to dissipate. And this worries us because we like to hold on. We're very needy, attached people. But Neptune goes, you need to make space. You need to make space, and you've got all this stuff in your life that you're holding on to that's cluttering your life up, and it's not working for you. And so you have to let go of a lot of stuff around this particular period of time. But the stuff that they want to let go of, you want to let go of, is really messy stuff. It's messy stuff in your life that's not working. And it does wake you up because all that's foggy, all that's foggy and confusing and clouded. And sometimes we live in this dreamland, we live in this kind of la la land that everything's okay. And then all of a sudden Neptune comes up and you go, oh, you know the fog starts to clear, the confusion starts to, and you can actually start to see your life really for what it is. And basically what it's trying to do is it's trying to get you to go right down into the into your intuition or into your inner voice or into your inner knowing, because that's trying to come through. That's trying to speak to you now. And we don't like that very much because, we like to hold on to the stuff we know. We like to hold on to what's familiar to us, even when it's not working for us. But our inner voice is saying, let go of that. Leave that go. You've got to make space for this wonderful stuff that wants to come in. It's like a incredible spiritual guide that's trying to help us, trust the process of our life unfolding organically and naturally. And that's what the Neptune one is about. And sometimes for a lot of us, letting go of stuff is really, really difficult. But if we do and we allow the process to just morph the way into what it's supposed to be, it's going to be beautiful and it's going to be very natural and it's going to be based mainly on what our soul wants for us. Uranus is the break free. Uranus is like, get me out, get me out of these chains, get me out of this straitjacket, that we've created for ourselves, really. Because, Uranus is that fear in us of doing our own thing and being our own person and being liberated and being able to color outside the lines and take chances. And we're all so scared of doing that. We're worried about, oh, what's other people going to think? And what's my mother going to think? And, I still want to be liked and I still want to be popular. And if I do what I want to do, people aren't going to enjoy it or people are going to think I'm crazy or whatever. It's kind of like, if you do what you want to do, if you're free enough to break the chains, if you're liberated enough to move into the real you, your more authentic you, that's when your life starts to take shape. Because your life can't take shape if you're pretending to be somebody else. Your life can't take shape if you're scared to explore your freedom. If you're
Right.
holding yourself back, if you're tying yourself up, there's no way your life is going to actually move forward. Uranus is a very, as you know, it's a very forward-thinking planet. It's about moving forward. It's about evolution and revolution. And that's what it wants for us. And we can't move forward if we're tying ourselves up by trying to conform and trying to be what other people want us to be and trying to fit our square peg into our round holes. It's kind of like it can't work that way. So those three in the midlife, the cycles, the hard aspects they make in their own
Yeah,
cycle,
yeah.
huge, huge stuff.
Huge, yes. Well, I just wrapped those up. So like, because I experienced all of I experienced all of them quite semi recently, but I just wrapped up the Uranus opposition.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like nothing like I've ever experienced.
Wow.
Nothing. Because I have a lot of fixed too. So I have Scorpio,
Hmm.
Leo, and Taurus. So that was like super huge awakening. That for me, what that meant was doing a lot of work with the Akashic records.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's another side of Uranus that a lot of people don't talk about. The whole like intuition, the brilliance, the
Yeah.
all our ability to channel information from the divine or from the
Hmm.
cosmos, the sky, whatever
Hmm.
you want to call it. And that's what it meant for me, but it did liberate me from a lot of uh from my old job, from like ways of seeing the world. I mean, it was just a huge awakening.
It can be like an extreme makeover for some people. Some people come out of Uranus completely different people,
Oh yeah.
because there was something in there that was let loose that they've been holding back, they've been pushing down and they haven't allowed it any room to breathe. And then when Uranus happens, there's something, it's a little bit like an earthquake fault, when the earthquake kind of, you living in
Yeah.
San Francisco would know about this.
Oh yeah.
They push up against each other, and then all of a sudden it's like a crack, and then all of a sudden everything starts to shake. Uranus can feel a little bit like that. It can feel a little tiny bit like, something's got to give, something's got to move now. And that's why, there's a lot of people that make some radical changes around this time. Um, I always think that the cycles and the harder aspects within the cycles are always big decision-making times for people. People really have to sit down and make big choices around what they want to do in life. And the the universe does this to us. The universe puts stuff in our laps and actually goes, this is what's happening now. This is the way you're feeling right now. And it's all because we want you to evolve. We want you to become the better version of yourself. We want your life to really start to improve and have more purpose and have more meaning and have more joy. And this is the only way we can do it. We're having to face you with stuff that's holding you back. And so the choices you make are about that. It's kind of like, am I going to make choices that are going to make my life improve my life, that are going to make my life better? Or am I going to stay stuck? Am I going to stay scared? Am I going to go back in the other direction? And you know what I mean? You have the choice to go either way. It would be much easier for you and much better for you if you chose to move forward.
Right.
But again, it doesn't make you bad or wrong if you stay where you want to stay. It's just a difference between having a more fulfilling in life and not. So
Right. Hmm.
your choices are still in your hands. Now, I always think, with astrology, a lot of people still think, the planets and your chart are going to do it for you. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, they're going to present the energy, they're going to present the situation or the circumstances. But what are you going to do with the energy? What are you going to do with that situation? It's
Of
still
course,
there. It's
yes.
still there for you to make choices around.
Yes,
So
I mean we have free
important.
will. Yes.
Yeah.
The the concept of free will I spend a lot of time thinking about. Um, but also remembering that those planets aren't outside of ourselves, but inside of ourselves. And I think that's really important because, well, I think that that's how, well, that's how I see astrology, right? Like all the planets being a part of our psyche, right? A part
Yeah.
of who we are, complex beings, unique beings. And it's not that they do anything to us. It's like the energies are awakened.
Yeah.
That has always been there. If you are in
Exactly.
a, let's say, in a situation you've been dreading to be, but that you haven't had the courage to break away from, well, it's probably going to be presented to you at the Uranus opposition, right?
Hmm.
And that's your
That's
chance to make that, to take that road.
that's
Uh,
right.
mhm. But yeah, I'm wondering what are you thinking about? In my book, I've written in your stars. I ran into some interesting timelines. Because like, especially because like Pluto just shifted into Aquarius.
Hmm.
And as we know, Pluto got demoted for the reason that it doesn't have a regular orbit.
Hmm.
And it has an irregular orbit. And I cannot, like, for example, the younger generations that are born with Pluto, let's say in Aquarius, right? We're already having babies being born with Pluto in Aquarius since 2024. They're going to experience all their Pluto activations at a different time,
Much later.
much
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
So for us, like, uh, well, I'm from the Pluto in Libra generation.
Hmm. I'm
Uh,
Pluto and Virgo.
you're Pluto in Virgo. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I got it. I got my Pluto, square Pluto very early in 37. But now it's starting to get, Pluto is slowing down, taking a longer time to go through signs. And so your generation would have got it, what, about 39, something like that?
Yeah, yeah, I think I was around that time
Pluto
that,
square Pluto. Yeah.
yeah, it was the first one actually that I experienced.
Yeah.
It was the Pluto, then it was the Neptune Square.
That's usually around 42, 41,
Yeah,
42. Yeah.
yeah. So in my book, I left the times very open just because I wanted to
Mhm.
work for every single generation. But yeah, in my book, I show a timeline of every activation. And so what I have here for the Neptune Square, it's actually pretty similar to the Uranus opposition, actually. The Uranus is 39 to 45,
Yeah.
and the
And
Neptune,
that's another one that can be a little bit earlier and a little bit later for certain generations too. Not as extreme as Pluto, but the generations even before me, but generations born in the 1940s have actually got Uranus first. They got it, I
right.
think, in the late 30s. Our generation's got it around 44-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah,
44-ish.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's really interesting, like
Mm.
how that moves. But and the same thing with Chiron, but like Chiron is even more of a
Aaron's a different story, isn't
different story.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, so basically life kind of accelerated for our generation,
Mm.
right? The Pluto in Virgo, Pluto in Libra generation.
Yeah. And then it started slowly to slow down because even the people born at 2000, the turn of the millennium, they're getting their first Pluto square, I think, in the late 40s, coming up to 50. Children that are born now, little babies that are being born in hospitals now, they're not going to get it until they're about 70, I think, late 60s going into 70. So
Yeah.
it's so interesting, isn't it? Because it feels like our generation who got Pluto square Pluto early. in our late 30s, going into our very early 40s. It feels like there's something in us, in what we have to go through, being born at the time we were, that, our transition or our, rebirthing, transformation, or being able to be empowered, um, is really important for us to do in our so-called younger period of our life. And you can actually see in the world, at the moment, and, in the recent past, the changes that have happened very, very quickly for us. Our generations have had to keep up with a lot of change.
Yes.
I look back at when I was a kid, and I look back at the stuff we had to deal with when I was a child. And there used to be I don't know if you remember the cartoon, the Jetsons, which was a cartoon about a family that lived in the future. And they
Yeah.
had all this really crazy mod con technical stuff. And I remember as a kid thinking, oh God, wouldn't it be great to be like that? And you wouldn't have to worry about, because everything was done automatically. And now we're living in that world. We're living in that world now. We're living in the world of the Jetsons. And our generation had to go through so many changes because life was spiraling really, really quickly throughout our decades.
Right.
And
Mhm.
so I think the need for us to get that Pluto early was about that, because we're in a generation where everything is changing so, so quickly, and we're having to adapt so, so quickly to new things all the time, that, we're going through like mini deaths and rebirths all the time. That's over, that's finished, here's the next one. That's over, that's finished, here's the next one. That's over, that's finished, here's the next one. And so we're going through our own Pluto kind of transformative things constantly, decade after decade after decade after decade. And I've got a feeling that our generation really, really had to understand Pluto. We really had to understand that things are always going to go through, periods of regeneration. And, we're going to have to understand that there's going to be little mini deaths and rebirths throughout our lives constantly. And we've got to have to come to terms with that. We've got to have to be comfortable with that. We can't be scared of that. And so maybe in the generations later, I don't know, maybe in the generations later, they might not be experiencing that as much as we did. I don't know. I think maybe it might plateau out in some kind of way. But for us, for our generations, the generations that were born, particularly in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and into the early 80s, um, for us, we've really had to swim out with the sharks. You know what I mean? We have, haven't we? We've really had to swim amongst stuff that's really come at us and really hit us in the face, and we had to deal with things, on that level of of
Mhm.
of survival and how we're going to keep our head above water. And we're kind of doing it now in a big way,
Yeah.
because Pluto just moving into Aquarius.
Wow.
That huge shift, you can see it in the world now, you know, particularly in the US.
Oh
You can
yeah.
see full on, full on.
100%. Yes, it's pretty intense. I mean, I remember remember when all the AI came out, it was just when Pluto was even it hadn't even started
Mm,
its journey. Because I find it fascinating when you can see the emerging energies of one planet, even before of a planet sign combination, even before the planet has even touched
hmm
that sign. And the funny thing is, like, I was in your part of the world when that came out. I was in New Zealand. So I remember perfectly that moment because I was like on a 3-week vacation and kind of like out of the loop, kind of like I was so out of the loop, I ended up going into an area that had been evacuated without knowing that there was evacuation happening. But anyway, I returned back and then everybody was in this frenzy, It was like, and they have like robots that are cops and the self-driving cars. Because like I'm by San Francisco and the self-driving cabs are all over the place now.
mm,
Um, and it was just this fear, at a certain point. And that's why astrology is so helpful because when you know astrology, you have like a context, right? And so, me as a professional astrologer, like Pluto in Aquarius, that's Pluto in Aquarius, and this is Pluto in Aquarius. And sometimes it made me wonder, like, whoa, Pluto is not even in Aquarius yet, and all of this is happening. Um, and it's such an interesting subject, but I'm really glad that you are saying that because I feel like, and not to compare any type of experience because we're all living our own experience in what we wrote for ourselves. I'm a firm
Mm.
believer of that. But I feel like some of the younger generations think that they are having it very difficult when in reality it was the older generations that did in a way, like 40s,
Yeah,
like you were saying. So it's a
yeah,
different set of learnings and it's a different set of transformations.
exactly. Exactly. It's just done in a whole, with a whole new scene. It's everyone's still going through what they have to go through, but it's like the setting is completely different. It's a completely different setting. Same story but different scenery. So, you know, you look back at, as I said, our generation, well, particularly my generation, because I'm a lot older than you are, and the generations even before mine, my parents' generation who went through wars, who people were going to war and, having to deal with, people dying in that respect. And I went through the AIDS generation. I was
Oh yeah.
a young man watching a lot of my friends because I was in theater back in the 80s when I was in my 20s. That was when Pluto was in Scorpio and AIDS was rife and it doesn't get talked about anymore. You know what I mean? We know it exists and there's a pill, thank God, that can keep people with AIDS alive. But back in those days, if you got AIDS, you died.
Okay.
And I was around lots and lots and lots of very, very young people, particularly my friends in the acting world, who were dying one after each other in the 80s. And so again, this is a Pluto in Scorpio kind of thing in a way. And it's not about um, scaring us or making the people who, it's not about the fear that it conjured up, because it did a lot of that for sure. But it was just trying to get through to us about much power, how much power we're still giving away, particularly on the level of feeling bad about ourselves and feeling wrong and feeling guilty, because most of the people who were getting AIDS back in those days were gay people, and gay people were vilified back then. Not so much anymore, but back then, and they were told that they were sinners and they were evil and God hates them and all that kind of stuff. So, you know what I mean? It's a very self-hating kind of thing to carry.
Mhm.
And during that period of time, it was Pluto actually trying to empower these people. But unfortunately, during that period of time, most of those people were just they kind of felt very I want to say victimized by what was going on, by society and what was happening. And so at the end of that, did things change? Did people become different? Pluto, did people rebirth? Did people regenerate? Did people have a different view of people like gay people or people who were disenfranchised or people who were slightly, you know, living on the taboo side of life, that kind of thing? Did it change? Did people actually start to become more accepting, more open, more loving? Maybe some people did. I hope so. I hope so because but again, there was still a lot of people who didn't. There was still a lot of people who stayed in their old-fashioned ways of being. But the whole Pluto thing and understanding the Pluto cycle and understanding Pluto going through signs is always going to be at the end of it at the end of it, has there been any kind of rebirthing, kind of new butterfly coming out of the caterpillar kind of change via something that's been kind of really brought up from the underworld, by having to face the truth or having to face something that's very controversial or provocative or in your face? Has there been a positive change by having to face that? And at the moment, with Pluto in Aquarius, and it's going to be in Aquarius until what, 2039, something like that.
It's 2044.
2044, of course, yeah.
Mhm. Like
2039,
long time.
2039 is Neptune in Aries.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah.
that's 2039. 2044 is Pluto in Aquarius, yeah. So here we go with this one because Aquarius is people power. It's
Oh,
people,
100%.
it's
100%.
people power.
Oh, yeah.
So we the people, we're the ones who have to go through the transformative change on the level of our power because we the people have allowed others to get away
Oh,
with
sure.
diabolical stuff.
Oh, for sure. And
And
it's still happening.
totally.
It's still
So
happening. But
there's
I
a
think
there's a
that's we need to
rumbling.
go through that darkness to like wake up, that
Exactly.
Pluto
Exactly.
exposes the darkness.
And how far can we get pushed? How far can we get pushed to the edge until we actually go, oh my God, And we're being pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. So,
Yeah. No, I mean 100%. And I think people are waking up, but I think that I mean we're in a time where yes, a lot of people are waking up, but there are still some people that are very conditioned to um to open their eyes.
mm,
I mean, it's happening, but again, Pluto puts you through the drench in before the rebirth. You go into you have to go through the swamp.
you do. You have to run across the hot coals, You have to go through your ring of fire.
And that's what happens when you're having a Pluto transit or you're having your Pluto square.
Totally. Totally.
You have to get deep. There's nothing superficial about it. Uh, you can't. It's a dark night of the soul, but it is necessary.
Yeah.
Um,
It's the absolute truth of what's going on. You have to face
yes,
that.
you have to face that. And I think people are like shocked, like right now to see that there is still so much darkness because even though there's so much light coming through, because of anyway, I could get really crazy into how the photon belt and all of that is happening, but that's kind of outside of the conversation. But just as there's so much light coming through, there's also darkness because the light is going to shine
Yeah.
light on the darkness.
Well, exactly. And
And
that's
so,
how it's supposed to be at the end. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
Pluto in Aquarius and nobody alive seeing it and it's rewriting because even we always think about looking into the past to try to predict the future. But there's a completely new set of energies and I think I remember what was the aspect that you were talking about that what that happened with the AIDS epidemic. That was the Saturn
Yeah.
Pluto, right? That was part of the Saturn Pluto cycle.
That was Saturn Pluto began it. Jupiter was in the mix too. Like
Oh,
we had the same conjunction at the beginning of COVID.
oh, no, so
Remember?
it was the same as in Capricorn. Yeah. So,
So it started two pandemics in two different ways.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now with Pluto in Aquarius, I mean, I think the challenges are so outer worldly and those who will have all their Pluto sextile, right? Like the Pluto sextile, and then here comes the cycle. It's like nobody's ever experienced that. So it comes with a completely different set of energies than
Mhm.
um I mean I had my square when Pluto was in Capricorn. And I think it was pretty close to when I got my first book published.
Right, right.
But I mean, here we are, I'm just curious. This might be a little off topic, but like, how do you see Aquarius? Do you see it as like ruled by Saturn and Uranus, or like by Uranus alone? What's your perception of that?
Just as far as rulership is concerned,
Hmm.
I'm a modern astrologer. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, so I deal mainly with the modern rulers. So I look at Uranus as Aquarius's ruler.
Hmm.
Um, But I often look at Saturn as a support, you know.
Right. Same.
If I'm looking at a chart or I'm teaching, I will immediately go to Uranus, and Uranus becomes kind of the star above the title. But then I go, oh, let's have a look at Saturn. Let's have a quick look at Saturn and what Saturn is saying, because there's something about the Aquarian energy that's very Saturnian to me. And, when I was a little bit younger, I was like, oh, the old rulers, I wasn't a big fan of the old rulers because I thought the old rulers were just there because they hadn't discovered the ones that really spoke to those particular signs. But I'm realizing now that the old rulers, even though I make them kind of second, are still very, very important and still very strong because there's something very Saturnian about Aquarius. Aquarius, everyone goes, oh, Aquarius is just a sign of freedom and a sign of, all coming together, in that societal, communal, let's get our heads together and make a change in the world. That's very Aquarian. And you go, yeah, yeah, it is. It's incredibly Aquarian. But I find Aquarius energy is still very, very serious. It's a very serious energy. It's the energy of, I'm going to tie myself to the tree.
Oh
You're not
yeah,
going
it's
to take
very fixed. It's like very
it's the
fixed. Yeah.
fixed, it's a fixedness.
Hmm.
I'm going to get thrown into the back of the wagon before I give in. There's this kind of heels dug in kind of, it's very fixed, but it's also very Saturnian in that way, in that Saturn way of, I've got a goal, I've got a mission, I've got to achieve something, I've got somewhere to go. And it's got this solid kind of structured, forceful kind of energy about it as well. And so when I look at Aquarius, I tend to go down the Uranian road first, as I said, because I always think, it's always going to be about a better future and having to plan and change things for those reasons. But it's not flippant, it's not kind of easy and playful, and it's not mutable. It doesn't have that feeling of, well,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
can we can chop and change, and it's kind of it's right there. You know what I mean? It's right on. It's got a goal. It's moving forward in that way. So that, saying that, I kind of use both. I tend to do a lot of that kind of stuff in my astrology too. I don't throw things out. I tend to, whatever comes my way, I give a good look to, and I use it, and I try to find how it can be used well and properly and prove itself in some kind of way. And then I bring it into astrology in a way where I'm not a big fan of discarding anything. I like to be able to bring it in a way where it's going to work and where it fits and where it makes sense. So old rulers and new rulers.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the same way. I do because I see both dimensions
Yeah.
of it working. But okay, so since you run a school, you said you've been running this school for 18 years. Wow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
amazing. Congratulations. Are you gonna have a party for 20 years? Just wonder.
I
Um,
haven't even thought about that yet, but who knows? Maybe I'll do
Here's the
something.
Leo moon, asking you if you're gonna have a party. Um, but so in your work, how important do you think um for your student, how important do you think learning how the planetary cycles work? Or how do you see that bringing a more understanding on how the
Mhm.
universe works, how the planets
Mhm.
work, um, how would you say, how would what would you think? Um, or at what moment do you introduce that to your students?
Um, Cycles to me are super, super, super important. So I bring them up relatively early in my training.
Mhm.
Um, I really they have to understand the planets, the signs, and houses first, and be able to understand a birth chart, and be able to understand the aspects. But I move into cycles pretty quickly after that, because to me, cycles, they're like chapters in a book, in a big book. Every cycle it has its own chapter, and because it's going around, it's not linear. We're not linear. Nothing on the planet is linear, and the chart is not linear. The chart is constantly in a state of moving, in this direction. It's a spiral. And every cycle is about, having its own, as I said, having its own chapter within the whole book, which is our life. And the spiral is actually going up. The spiral is finishing one spiral, and then you go to the next spiral, and then you go to the next spiral, and then you go to the next spiral. It's a little bit like going from elementary school to high school to, the college and then onwards. So it's a feeling of coming into a place now of being able to evolve, hopefully, being able to evolve each time you have a cycle. Each time you have a cycle and you move to the next cycle, let's hope that you've evolved to be able to get to the next tier of your evolutionary journey through each cycle. And so and every time a planet makes a strong aspect within the cycle, like a square to itself and an opposition to itself and a square to itself again before it returns, they're like milestones. They're like milestones within the cycle. And there's always going to be, every cycle has a beginning, comes to fruition, and then it peters out. And then it starts again, comes to fruition, and then it peters out. And you can see this in life all the time.
Right.
Everything does it. The seasons do it every single year. You know what I mean? Everything in life is doing exactly the same thing. And that's when people go, "Oh, I don't believe in reincarnation." I think everything you know what I mean? Everything recycles. Everything is going, is being born, coming to fruition, and then petering out and being born again. So we would be doing the same thing, wouldn't we? We're part of it. We're going through, just as being human, we're going through our own cycle. And so
Yeah.
everything in the chart cycles are so, so important, and to know where you are. And you know what one of the big ones are? It's the progressed lunation cycle.
Oh my
Knowing
God, that's my favorite. My
knowing where you
favorite.
are as far as that is concerned is huge.
It's
Huge.
huge. So actually, that is the last chapter of my first book, Moon Signs.
Do you want to talk about your book? Because I'm
Yes.
interested to find out a little bit more about your book.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So, but yes, the progressed moon is like my
Huge.
favorite thing. I use it so much. In fact, my progressed moon is in a tough place right now. It's been so crazy. But yes, so basically, this book is the book that I wanted to have when I started studying astrology. Because I'm just a very visual person and I wanted to have something that would give me that. And basically, what I start with the book, this is not necessarily a book to learn astrology. There are a lot of books like that, as
Mm.
you know. But this is a book designed to help people understand where they're at in their evolutionary journey according to their age, where they're at in those cycles. And so I do talk about a little bit, of course I do talk, I have chapters that initiate with like what's astrology, how to work with it. It's not just a predictive technique, but this is a book that's it's a companion. And while it goes into like what's astrology or how to see the chart, which a lot of astrologers, including me, I see we compare the chart to being a movie, for example. like the planets are the actors and the zodiac signs are the
Hmm.
costumes and
Yeah.
the aspects are the script and all of that. I immediately move into the long-term planetary cycles. And anyway, I just want to show the art a little bit because it's really
I
pretty.
love, oh, the artwork's fantastic, isn't
Thank you. I'm Taurus rising, so
it?
you
You
know,
love that.
that's really important for me, and that's why I actually chose this publishing house because I know that they've won awards for that. So
Okay.
yeah, they
Oh,
won
uh,
awards for their art.
that's, oh, isn't it? That's visually really beautiful.
It's pretty, right? Thank you.
That's great.
But like what I'm mostly, and I have a lot of examples. I have like the charts of like Nikola Tesla and just some people that I admire. Some of them are still alive, like Alexandria Ocasio. But I created this timeline like I was
Yeah,
showing.
I love the timeline.
And so you're in your age, you go to your age. It's from 7 to 90 years old. And you go to your age and you kind of figure out what you're living, right? What's happening. And then you go to the chapter of that planet, like for example, Jupiter, right? Jupiter is
Hmm.
the first. And then you read about the astronomy of Jupiter, the astrology, the highest vibration and the lowest vibration, because even Jupiter has a lowest vibration, obviously. Then I list Jupiter in the signs. I have two calculators to go with this book actually on my website. So I have like a birth chart calculator to pull your birth chart for free. And so you can figure out where your Jupiter is, right? And then I have a calculator that will help you figure out your entire Jupiter cycles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it tells you when you're gonna have your Jupiter sextile. It talks about the 12-year cycle
Mhm.
of Jupiter.
Oh,
And
wow.
and so
Oh,
the
that's
illu
cool.
the illustration is talking about,
Hmm.
right, like how the cycle goes, how it moves, how you get the sextile, the square, the trine,
Hmm.
the opposition, and then the waning, right? And I list all the ages.
That's so cool, Nariana.
Thank you.
That's
And
great. Yeah. So e and so easy too, by the looks of things. So easy to read.
well, that's my apparently that's kind of my life mission to like, in my human design, I have the archetype that brings very complex um themes and breaks them down. And so I'm a
Yeah.
very visual person, so I was like, I think I needed this to even just wrap my mind around it.
Yeah.
And I have strategies for harnessing or handling every single activation. So from the sextile to the square to the trine and all of that. And then I have real stories of people um that have experienced that cycle. Like for
Oh,
example,
wow.
yeah, like my colleagues, like I was saying, my dad's husband, his chart is so crazy because like he just experienced his Uranus return and got married around that time at 80 something. And then at the same time, he's experiencing his Neptune opposition, and then it's like pretty crazy. So I had a good guinea pig, but and but I really love the calculator because when you plug in, let's say all your birth information, it's gonna give you all of the cycle, and it's gonna tell you when it begins, all the different times that it's exact because of the retrograde motion. You know, of course, you know that when you're giving someone a reading and they're having some sort of cycle, they're always asking, when is this gonna end?
Yeah.
Right? So it has an
When's it
end.
gonna finish?
How long is this gonna last? Oh, so I have that, and I worked pretty hard to get that calculator. I'm happy to send it to you if you want to share it with anybody. Um, so I'm really proud of that. So basically that goes with the book just so to help people understand. And this book was designed to do the outer planets originally only, but then I decided that that would be too incomplete. And so I added the inner planets as well. I mean, sorry, the natal planets as well, just because I really want people to understand how important their Venus return is, or like their
Yeah.
Mars. I have a really intense Mars, so like for example, I have Mars in Leo conjunct my moon, so I always gotta keep tabs on Mars because you know, so.
The Mars cycle is very strong, I find.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the Mars cycle
Yeah.
is so important. I mean, to
Yeah.
get things done, to
Exactly.
um but I mean, I even talk about, for example, what type of Venus you have. I talk about the morning star Venus,
Oh
the
wow, you do the star points.
Mhm.
Oh, I love that.
Well, not necessarily the star points, but just like the type of Venus, the combust or the
Yeah, when they come into conjunction, do that.
evening
The
star and all.
combustion and
Um,
the inferior and inferior conjunction and superior conjunction, that kind of thing.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and so, but what I really want to convey in this book too is like it's also you can look back to it because you can kind of not in means to predict what's going to happen, because at the end of the day we decide what we want to create in our lives, but to figure out how we handled our relationship to that part of ourselves,
yeah.
to that planet, and so we can change that if we would desire, or
Hmm.
how to harness that again. And so yes, it's a pretty easy to read book, but it's also fun, and I was guided by my spirit guides to make this book a little bit more personal, because I've always struggled with self promotion.
Yeah.
Mars in the fourth. Um, so I bring stories that seem to me very personal, like around with my clients. For example, I have a beautiful Chiron return story that I had with one of my clients that became an astrologer. I have a story about a YouTuber, a very famous YouTuber in there for Neptune.
I
Uh,
love that. I think people love that. People love the personal touch because you can get so much with the technical side of things. There's a lot of really good technical books written technically, and for a lot of people, it can go over a lot of people's heads
oh yeah.
because it really can. And people are craving a little bit of heart. People are craving a little bit of being able to put their feelings or their soul into learning as well. So having stories, having stories around people experiencing particular cycles and particular transits and that kind of stuff. People are aching for that kind of thing. They really are, because you can learn so much. You learn so much through personal experience. You really do.
For
I'm all
sure.
people. Yeah, my students are always saying, what do I have to study? What do I have to learn? What book do I have to get? I always say, just do life. Do life. Watch a person. How a person is experiencing a particular transit. Watch what's going on in their life now. Watch how they're reacting to it. Watch how
Mhm.
you're going on. What's happening in your life, and what choices you're needing to make right now, That's going to be your best teacher. Life is going to be your best teacher. It was my best teacher, that's for sure. So that personal touch that you have in your book is exactly that. It's exactly, this is how a person has, what a person went through. This is how a person dealt with it. And this is how a person came out the other side,
Totally,
better because
totally.
of it.
And it's true. That's how you learn more, like for
Exactly.
example, something's
Totally.
happening. I'm not into celebrity stuff because I think that I don't like that whole culture. But like if something's happening with somebody, not me looking at their birth chart, just because I want to understand how of all the possibilities, like for example, I um, witnessed my husband, who is like I call him my partner in shine because I adore him. My second marriage, actually. I watched him totally. You were talking about Pluto coming into power. He took his life in his hands at his Pluto Square.
Wow. Wow.
He
Good on him.
did it, he did it. So I talk about that story here because he came from being disempowered and stuck and like just feeling like out of, he a little disappointed on himself.
Mm.
And when he had his Pluto Square, which was like actually in 2020, not an easy Pluto Square to have, but um his life turned around, but it was because he decided to take his power back. So that story's in there. Um, the story how I came into the world. So my guides told me you need to make this book a little bit more, put more heart in it. And because I'm so
Yeah.
academic, I come from journalism, so because
Yeah.
I'm so academic, it took me a while, but then I understood that that's what people want, like you said.
Totally, totally. Because, there's some great technical books out there, don't get me wrong, but they become a little bit sameish. They become a little bit like, oh, I read that in another book, or I read that in another book, because with writing technical books, you really can't go outside the technique. Where when you're writing something with a little bit more heart, that's a little bit more human and about human experiences, it's going to be unique. You're not going to pick up another book like it. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be unique to itself. And so,
Yeah.
and therefore it becomes really special and it's going to touch people. It's going to touch people. And I think astrology needs to do that. Astrology needs to touch people. It's not about up here. It really isn't. People seem to kind of try to get their heads into astrology and it's all up here. And it's kind of like, no, guys, come, let's go down.
Let's go
Let's
down to
start
the
to move
heart.
down into the heart chakra. Let's move down into the soul. That's where astrology is. That's where astrology lies. It's not up here. Up here is good because you need to know what's a square and what's an opposition and what's a 12th house and you need to know that. But once you know that, then you need to go down. Then you need to go down and everything is from there.
100%. And also like, well, I'm gonna quote one of my favorite astrologers. You obviously know him, Stephen Forrest.
Mm-hmm.
He what
My mate.
you might.
He's my mate.
He's your
You
mate.
know,
Awesome.
yeah, we're friends. We've been friends for years. Yeah.
Oh wow. Well,
Yeah.
I think it was and I'm looking at it, I think it's The Changing Sky, right?
Yeah.
I'm looking at that. He said, as an astrologer, the most important thing to keep is your humanity.
Mm-hmm.
Because without your humanity, you cannot express compassion to your clients, right?
Exactly.
You know how the Pluto square will feel. You know how the Saturn return will feel because you've lived it. And so when someone's experiencing that, it takes you back to your experience and you can show compassion. Like for me, what astrology has done is like it has helped me find compassion for certain people according to what they're living currently, like my mother, for example. Like it's like, well, that's a difficult chart. That's a difficult, that's something that astrology has given me.
Yeah.
One of the gifts that I've found. But yes, it's been so nice to talk to you. You're so seriously so nice for wanting to do this with me because I know that you're so busy and running the school and I'm really thankful for your time and do you want to share what you got going on? I mean, I know we know
Oh,
you're
you're very
fully
welcome.
booked.
You're
We know
very
you're
welcome,
fully
Mariana.
booked.
Uh, at the moment, I'm kind of a little bit all over the place. I'm doing a lot of stuff here in Australia, and I'm actually teaching some students in China too now.
Wow.
Wonderful Frank Clifford from London School of Astrology has asked me to do some teaching for them. Um, I've got a seminar conference in Bali in at the end of October. So if anyone feels like a trip to Bali and spending a week in Bali with Maurice Fernandez and myself and Lisa Jones, we're doing a week there. And it's
What is
from
the
the,
theme for that?
pardon?
What is the theme of that conference?
It's mainly going to be I'm going to be talking about the asteroids and how to work with the asteroids in the charts. I'm also going to be talking about the nodes, and coming into synastry with the nodes, having your nodes and somebody else's planets,
Oh, I
you know, having a,
love
having
that.
a past life with somebody else, that kind of thing.
I love that.
Maurice is doing a lot of stuff on Jupiter, and Lisa, I think, is talking a lot about our flower essences and how they're connected to our signs and our charts. So it's a very mixed bag of lots of different things that are on offer. But it's from the 25th of October to the 1st of November. And if you go to aquariusrising.net, I'm not putting it on, Lisa's putting it on. You will go there and she will have the brochure for it on aquariusrising.net.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
so that's the big one I'm doing this year as far as travel is concerned. I'm normally traveling. Last year I did Lake Como and I did the ESA conference in Colorado. Was that last year or the year before? But I'm around somewhere. I'm always popping up somewhere.
Oh, nice, nice. Do you have any Sagittarius or like Jupiter? Like,
My Jupiter's in Sagittarius and it trines my
oh,
sun.
oh, nice, nice.
Yeah, and I've got a ninth house sun.
Oh, wow. Look at
Yeah, so very sad.
that.
I've got a very Sagittarian energy in me,
Hmm?
um, but because of the ninth house sun and the Jupiter in its own sign, in trine to my Aries sun. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you were giving a lot of gifts. So no wonder why I kind of came into your orbit because I have triple Sag. Like the ruler of my chart is there too.
Oh, okay, okay. So we've connected on that level for
Yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah. Yeah, I
Plus
love,
other stuff, I'm sure too.
I'm sure. But yes, thank you so much for your time.
Thank
Um,
you, Mariana.
maybe one day I can sneak in a reading with you, maybe in 2027.
Well, I'm taking for 26. I just took my last 25. It was last week. I think I squeezed the last person into this year. So next year I can take people.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And well, hopefully we'll stay in touch. If you ever
Yeah,
come
for
around
sure.
here,
For
just let
sure.
me know.
And everyone buy Nariana's book, please, because it's going to be fabulous. It's going to be fabulous. Written in the
Okay.
stars.
Yes, it's called
Yeah,
Cream in Your Stars. Use your Saturn Return, Pluto Square, and other planetary cycles to become your best self. So,
you've got to have it in your collection. It's a
yeah.
must.